There is absolutely no chance that this video is going to get views, but I'm most excited about this video. Not those hyped video, which I'm pretty sure are going to get attention and views, but this is the one I'm excited about, and it's going to get less views. Anyways, I'm super excited, so we have to do it. Hey there everyone, Hitesh here, and welcome to this fairly long video in which we are going to jump into the engineering of something. Yes, we are going to be doing kind of a reconstruction of a part of a framework known as Nextjs. Yes, we'll be reconstructing a major portion of it, and this is the portion which actually makes it super exciting. So we'll be doing that. I'll walk you through what we are about to do. But first of all, a prerequisite. This video is not absolutely beginner friendly. So if you're somebody who is just watching the code, trying to figure out the loops and arrays and bit of a structure like that, this video is not going to be much helpful. But if you are somebody who is exploring already the JavaScript portion of it, React, Next.js, and kind of exploring the things, then you'll be loving it absolutely. And also a tiny bit more of the prerequisite. I'll be using Express in this application, but there's nothing to be worried about Express. I'll just walk you through that there is one tiny piece of code that I'll walk you through on the go that, hey, this is the portion of the Express and that's how it works, and we'll be using that. We'll be creating just one route, which is the get route, to actually display something. And through that, we'll be re-engineering some of the fun stuff. So this is super excited about the video. And it actually took me some time to actually figure out that how we can do it. And that's what you'll be enjoying the most. So let me walk you through what we are about to do. In case you have watched my Next.js series, so let me walk you through. So there is no prerequisite of watching any Next.js series. There is only one thing that you should know about it. So if you know about the Next.js, you know that we do everything in the file. So file naming is the most important thing in the Next.js, and this is the previous project. You can just check it on my GitHub. And what you'll notice that if I go ahead and open the API and the login, everything is in the route.ts file, and there I write simply a async function, which can be a post or something. So we want to build something like this, a routing system which is file based. So how can we re-engineer that, recreate that? The most difficult part for me to actually figure out or wrap my head that how this can be done is this square syntax. So how can I detect a file which is a square bracket, then a file name inside it, and there are a couple of variants of it also. Probably there can be a user underscore ID. So that's also a chance of it. So how can I figure it out? And that's where I used my lovely tool, which I'm using a lot these days. So let me walk you through. Yes, it took me a couple of prompts and bits and pieces that how can I find the perfect regex. Who writes regex these days? Everybody just goes onto their favorite AI platform and just work through that. I use Copilot, this Copilot here from the pieces, because it actually keeps all of my code in here. It doesn't send it to anywhere else. I'm not worried about the security of my code. So that's what I actually use. So thank you so much, pieces. Again, it's a free tool. I'm just loving it. So that's why I'm using it a lot. I tried a lot of things that how can I actually explain it what I really want. And finally, I wrote a prompt. So, hey, this is a prompt engineering. I could have made this video as a prompt engineering, could have get more views anyways. So finally, I wrote a perfect prompt to it that, hey, I want a regular expression that matches with the alphanumeric characters, period or underscore, and surrounded by square bracket. So surrounded by the square bracket, that actually took me. And finally, it gave me this entire thing, which is actually workable. And I've used this one. So exactly that. And I'll also put some link in the description section so that you can grab the exact code as well. So don't you worry, I'll give you that as well. No worries at all. So coming back, so this is what? So let me explain you what we are about to do. I am a big fan of how Next.js handles the routing system. There is no routes that you have to declare. Everything is file based. If the file is there, the route is there. And if you want to just serve anything, then just go ahead and create a file of that name, and that's it. That's the whole idea about the Next.js, and that's what I love about it. There is no routing mechanism. Everything is just there. These days, they have modified that how you have to actually have this app folder, and inside that there is an API folder. There, the APIs are being served. That's there, the pages are served. Yes, of course, that's very complex, but you'll get the entire idea how that is being done. And on top of this, we will also learn how to handle the dynamic routes as well with the square brackety thing. And we will be grabbing the parameters, and that parameters will be available to us in the request. Yeah. How cool is that? Everything reconstructed from the scratch itself. That's really, really fun. I like about it. So let me go ahead and walk you through that how we'll be doing it. First, what we need is a new folder. So I'll probably push that on GitHub as well. Although there's nothing too much, but still I'll push it. Okay, so what we're going to do in this one is, let's just call this one as Nextjs routing. Yeah, routing from scratch. I don't know what the file name is, but we'll be just doing with that. All right, so I'll just get a VS Code and we'll be dragging, dropping that. So that's what we'll be having this one. All right, so this is it. This is basically. And we won't be having too much of the things inside this one. This is actually too much of the wide. How come this is too wide? Yeah, I think that's perfect. I'm now adjusted nicely there on the corner. All right, so first thing that you have to do is initialize a project, obviously. So npm init, I would love to go -y. I'm not really interested what's happening in the npm. Then all we have to do is npm install express. And I also don't want to keep on reloading it. So I usually don't do this, but I'll install nodemon for this one because I have to save it again. Saving it, restarting is a pain. Don't want to do it. So I'll just install. Should have installed it as a dev dependency, but hey, we are advanced users here. Nobody's a fresher up here. All right, so we have this package.json and we have this. So let's go ahead and say, hey, we will be having a start script. The start script is going to initialize nodemon index.js. Feel free to name it index.js, server.js, whatever you like. I also love to use modules. So I'll just go ahead and say, hey, type will be not common.js, but module. It's easier than the required syntax. You get it. So let's create one more file, and only file that will be index.js. All right, since this is not too much of the things which I should be sharing with you, because rest of the files and folders that we'll be creating, I'm not worried about them. I'm just going to be creating them for the sample purpose, for the testing purpose. So I'm not much bothered about it. So let's go ahead and first name that how it should be named. It's totally up to you. What do you want to name it? I'll go ahead and name it. Let's just say, for example, we'll call this one as routes or app. Let's just call this one as app, although not really a good name. App route, app routes. Yeah, whatever. So we'll be calling it as app routes. Now the whole idea behind doing that is that I should be able to create folders inside it. Let me just show you what I really want. If I go ahead and create a folder here inside this, for example, a folder with the name of user, and then inside this, if I go ahead and create a new file known as index.js, then I should not be creating a routes inside this. I should be able to directly write what I really want to write. That's it. For example, I can go ahead and say that, hey, I want to export a simple handler. You can name this function whatever you like. So I'll go ahead and simply say export const, if I can write that, const handler, whatever the name of the function you are having. And after this, I'll just say, hey, request response, and then we'll be using arrow function. And technically, we'll be able to return, we'll be saying user index file. There we go. Now notice here, I'm not sending this response back to the user by saying res.send. I'm actually returning this back. And that is the syntax I want to craft. And there could be more. There could be more routes into this. We'll definitely talk more about it, that how we can have the files and folders and whatnot. But this is exactly what we want to have. There could be more just like this. For example, I'll just create one more here and we'll be definitely discussing that as well. Another challenge in front of us is if I create a new folder with the name of city, and what should be this folder file name here? Now, inside of this, the another challenge that we have is if I create a file with the name of square brackets, that's what the Nextjs use. And if I name this as city, the name is really important here. And then I go ahead and say .js, then I should be able to create a dynamic route out of it. For example, if somebody visits whatever our localhost 4000, whatever that port number is, /city/Jaipur, I should be able to grab the Jaipur out of it. So it's a dynamic route handling. Yeah, this is exciting. So how we're going to handle this, this is all the video is all about. So let me walk you through with first the basics. So let me just go ahead and say, hey, this is all good. Let's close this. Let's close this. Let's close this. We'll come back onto this. We'll explore more about it. First, let's go into index.js. And since we have initialized the basic express, first let's go ahead and work with that. So again, really basic, import express from express. And the most important thing for this entire project is actually the file system. Yeah, nothing goes beyond the file system in this one. And this is where you have to be really cautious, because one of the crucial operation of the entire programming world is file handling and file access. If somebody is trying to access the file, even directories, it needs to be a way to sync because it takes time. So that's the basic of it. Okay, what we have to do after this, obviously we have to say const app express because we create an app, and this app needs to listen, and that's what basically your server is. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll be saying app.listen, and we'll be listening on port 3000, whatever the port actually works for you. If it doesn't work for you, then go ahead and use 3000, 4000, whatever you like. I'll just go ahead and say 3000, and then we'll be having a callback just like this, and we'll be saying console.log, and server started on port 3000. We are not going into env variables and all of that. That's not the focus. All right, so this should work. Yeah, this is going to work, but there is a slight difference that how, okay, by the way, for those people who actually don't know how the express and all these things works, now with this app, actually you can go ahead and serve on the route. So if we go ahead and say, hey, app.get, and I go ahead and use this. So this is actually going to go ahead and serve the slash. You can go ahead and name it anything, slash, probably Instagram, whatever the route you want. We want to go with the basic home slash route. And now if I go ahead and work like this and say res will return res.send, received a get HTTP method, received a hello world, from slash. All right, and now what we can do is npm run start or npm start, both of them are same. All right, so looks good. Now we can go ahead and make a request on port 3000. So let's go ahead and create a new request. There's too many of the requests. Clear all, please. Don't want to expose anything on which I was working on. All right, so let's see what we can do is localhost colon 3000 http:// and we are serving on slash. So we'll be just sending a get request on the slash, and this actually, hopefully, and is going to send me the response. So I'll just close this one. So this actually says received a hello from the slash. So just like exactly like this, it works. In case you want to serve on some different route as well, you can go ahead and serve on different route. That's a kind of a crash course for people who don't know it. So for example, if I go ahead and say Twitter, and I'll just name that, hey, where do I got a hi from hitesh.com. Save that, and now you can actually go ahead and make another request onto this one. So if I go ahead and make a request on, where am I making the request? On slash Twitter, of course. There we go, and we send it, and obviously we get a hi from. So this is the basic crash course of why Express is being used. But I hope you can understand that there is so much going on into this one. We have to create a route for every single possible use case. Get route for Twitter, slash, and everything. We don't want to do this. We want to do something different, which is app-based routing. So this app routes, or in the case of Nextjs, we use something known as just the API. So there could be any folder that is there, and you can just go ahead and work with that. So that's exactly what we are going to work as well. So in this case, there are a couple of more things that also we need to worry about. The first thing is, once you have got the Express, right now your Express cannot actually handle any kind of a JSON data. So all you have to do is say that, hey, I want to accept the JSON data. So for that, we have to use something known as middleware. These are default middlewares. In case you want to learn about the custom middlewares, we have gone through with the Nextjs series on that. But hey, we are going to go use like that. And also there is one more, which is app.use, and we'll be using Express URL encoded, extended true. Consider them as almost like syntax, but they helps you to actually grab the JSON from the request.body and anything that's from the URL encoded kind of a thing. You'll find this kind of a thing written in almost every server. There is nothing too much. Now, I don't want to do these kinds of 1,000 different routes. Yes, there are better strategies of keeping routes in folders, having a sample routes and something like that, but we don't want to use it. Luckily, in the Express, we have something known as app.all, which actually tracks for all the routes. Yep. And you can use something known as slash here. So slash and asterisk. Now this will be handling every single route that we have. But the problem is, it looks great, but some of the routes that we are going to use obviously are going to access the file system because everything is file based. So we cannot just go ahead and say request response next, something like this. All we have to do is go in the async mode forcefully. So we have to say async, and once the async is there, then go ahead and say request, and this is going to be response just like that. And we'll be saying, hey, here is your callback. That's it. Okay, why are you bothering now? Probably there is an extra. Yeah, that was extra. All right, so once we are inside this, now comes the interesting part. How can I go ahead? There's too much of suggestion. How can I go ahead? And the first challenge is, how can I grab where the user is actually making a request? That is crucial for me. So for this, the easiest way of doing this is, let's just do a console log of request.url. This request has so many things inside it that you can find so much of the information. If I go ahead and save this, now you'll be surprised to see that if I go ahead and do the console log and move into this part here, now if I go ahead and send this, it actually gives me this /Twitter. Although the response is not there, we haven't designed it, but if I go ahead and instead of Twitter, if I go ahead and say Instagram, and if hey, how can you stop? Cancel, yeah. If I go ahead and say Instagram, I can get this. So this parameter actually is super helpful in my case. So that was the step one. I can grab the request.url. Now, another thing that I have to do is almost like a constant here, just after the express, is create a root folder. Root folder. This root folder is actually a reference of what you want to really call your folder structure. So in my case, that is going to be simply app route. In your case, it could be something else, but I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, this is going to be /app routes. It could be APIs, it could be app, whatever you like to have. So I'll just say my folder structure is /, it's in the home page or the current directory. And then we have app routes. It could be something like this. In case you don't like this, maybe that's app /API, something like that. So we need to have a reference of this. So that is the most important thing for us. We'll go back and we'll go with the routes. No, not routes, app routes. So everything is inside the app routes. Notice here, I have also added a trailing slash here, and we just saw that we are also getting this /Twitter. So sometimes they might clash. So we also have to take care of this part as well. We'll do that, no problem there. But one thing is sure, that now I have access to what the URL is. And if I have access to root folder, now using the file system, I can go inside this and can find out what are the folders here. And inside this, what are the file names and all of that. So I can do a lot of magic here. So we'll be doing something like this. So let's go ahead and try to see if we can find out whether that folder exists or not, or at least get the file name here. So let's go ahead and grab whatever the URL is. So in order to do so, the first thing that I have to do is join the two things. So what we're going to do is root folder is going to get joined by the request.url. Ignore my suggestions, they are crazy. Okay, so we have got this request.url. Now, the things are okay, they are great, but they are not really marvelous. The reason for that is really simple, that just like I showed you, come on, why is it not opening? Yeah, there is a slash here, so there could be a clash. I'm not saying it will happen, but there could be a clash of the slashes. Yes, that is something which bothered me while we were working on it. So now what you can do is, once the string is crafted, you can go ahead and use the replace method of the JavaScript, which is going to go ahead and say, hey, wherever you find the two slashes, just replace it with a slash. That is it. That is all it takes. Now let's go ahead and call this one as const, and this is my folder URL or the file URL. Now it's very difficult to call it, but basically it's a file URL. So let's call this one as file URL. All right, so now it will try to find a file, and now there is no guarantee that this exists. Let me just shrink this. All right, so there is right now no guarantee that this file will exist, but at least we have this file URL. So let's go ahead and console log this. We'll not use this, but at least let's try what we are getting file URL. Save this, let's go back onto this one, and let's try to hit the route of /Instagram. If I send this, notice here we are going into /, and then there is app routes, and then there is a /Instagram. Obviously this file doesn't exist, but what about the files that exist? So for example, if I go ahead and say user, so at least I should be able to grab the user at least. So let's just go ahead and see. If I go ahead and say /user, send this one, and there we go. We have this now route access, which is, hey, we have this /app routes and user. So I'm getting there. Okay, somewhere we have reached. Not fully, but I would say, hey, this is a great success and great start. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next part of it. Okay, once we have grabbed this thing, we have to see that whether this file actually exists or not. That is the million-dollar question. How we can do that? Luckily, in order to work with that, that's actually an easy thing. If you have studied this FS file system has a lot of methods, and one of this one is exist, and we will be using sync. So in this, you can actually provide this file URL and find out that whether this file exists or not. So what we're going to do is just use this one, and then we'll be just passing on this file URL. So file URL. All right, file URL. Once I have this file URL, then we have to concatenate as well, because the file name exists with the .js extension. In case you want to support more extension, be my guest, use a little bit more of the regex or regular expression that, hey, .js, .ts, whatever you want to support, you can go ahead and use that. Now, what we're going to do is hold this into a reference. So we call this one as does file exist, is file, yeah, whatever that is file exist. So now there is a chance that file might exist, and there's a chance that file might not exist. So that is the question here. All right, and what we're going to do is check. I use if else. So if there is no is file, we could have just named it as file. If there is no file, then do something. So what we're going to do is, yeah, this seems okay. Return the status. Yeah, looks good. Okay, we could have returned the status, but no, that's not going to do much of the stuff. What we need to do is, because just returning a response after this is not a good idea, because we don't want to send the user that, hey, file exists in our system or not. We want to execute that file. So we want to bring in whatever the import method in that file is written or there. Whatever the method, the handler is written there or not. So instead of this, let's go ahead and update this import URL based on this. So either the file exists or not. So how we can do this? Let's go ahead and remove this for a minute, and let's update this is file, because see, what I'm trying to say is this is a little tricky. Let me try to explain this. So there is this is file, and what we're going to do is, let me just try to console log this again, because that will help me to explain this one more time. So if I go ahead and open up this package.json, so come on, load this. Notice here, when I actually send a request to the /user, it gives me a app user. So what we are actually able to detect so far is whether that directory exists or not. Now, obviously, there are a couple of cases here. If that directory exists, there are chances that there might be an index.js file, or there is also a chance that inside this, there might be directly a user. Something like this. Let me show you that. Let me explain you that. So there are chances that there is an index.js file here. That's one thing. So if we are just looking for that, either go for the index.js, or there are also chances that after this, there is somebody might have done this, Hitesh. So if somebody is looking for it, either there should be a file or there should be a hitesh.js. I know this is a little bit confusing, but I'll just explain that in a second. First, let me write the code. This will automatically get a lot more clear to you. So if there is no file that exists, then probably we'll go ahead and say that, hey, the file URL is going to be plus equals. We are going to just append the /index.js. All right. And in the other case, why there is an extra this guy here? All right. And in the else case, what we're going to do is this file URL is going to get a .js extension. So I hope you understand this this piece of code. Little tricky to understand. What I'm trying to do is, in this piece of code is, if the file doesn't exist, then whatever the URL I've constructed, I'll assume that there is a /index.js after this. If the /index.js doesn't exist, then I'll assume that there is just directly a file name after it. So there is probably /user, then /hitesh if somebody was looking for it. So Either that's a file or I'll make this a file. I'll explain this a little bit more. I know this is getting a little confused, but don't you worry. We'll try to actually understand this a little bit more. All right, so once this is all done, that means I have constructed this URL. And let me show you that by actually now doing a console.log here. Don't worry, I'll explain each and everything and you will be able to understand this. Let's see what is happening with this file URL now, okay? Let's go back up here, and this is probably going to clear all of your confusions. And let's go ahead and open this. So what happens when I go ahead and say /user? So if I go ahead and say send, and it crashed it, but I'm pretty sure before crashing, it might have done this. Oh, I have actually got this one. Oh, I need to change that. Why everything is a const. This should be a let is file. This one also need to be let is file. So should be all happy now. All right, let's try it one more time. Let's go ahead and say /user. So if I go ahead, now notice here it says app routes, then we have user, then index.js was appended to it. Why index.js was appended to it? It's super easy to explain because this URL exists. User, and after this index.js exists. But what if I go ahead and directly say that, hey, after the user, I'm not looking for index.js, maybe I'm looking for a route which says Hitesh. If I go ahead and cancel this and send it again, I'm expecting that there is a folder after this Hitesh, and after this there is an index.js. But what? Notice here, if I create a new file here, which says hitesh.js, what in that case? Maybe I am handling this case directly. So let's try it one more time. If I go ahead and use this, send this again. Now notice here, now it's directly detecting hitesh.js. So this is exactly the case why we have written this piece of code. So we are catching up both the cases. Either serve directly user, that's one case. So notice here, either serve directly the user. So hey, and we obviously have index.js, so we are not worried about that part. If that exists, go ahead and use that. So I'll just cancel this, send this. So notice here, automatically, if the folder is there, and we'll be able to find this index.js. This is exactly this piece of code is doing. If the file URL is there, then go ahead and directly use a /index.js. If it doesn't exist, that means we have a false part. So we'll just go for directly looking for it. But what in the case, now there is another case. What in the case, Hitesh was there, but if I go ahead and say Sam, if I'm looking for that route, what happens in that case? We also go for Sam and then index.js. So that is a problem. If the file exists, we get that URL. That is good. But the problem is, which is going to crash our app, is that if that file doesn't exist, it still appends index.js onto it. Yeah, that is probably going to crash the error. So we need to work on it a little bit. That's why I told you this inner engineering is super, super interesting to work on with this. So now this part hopefully is now clear. Now let's go ahead and see. Now the most important part is that if the file exists, there should be a method inside it. For example, in the index, we have written a method handler here. So somebody needs to provide me the data, return me something. If you don't return me something, I'll assume that, hey, there was nothing, no file existed because you have not properly returned me anything. This actually solves my problem as well. Because Sam, we are constructing a URL Sam, which doesn't exist. So we need to take care of that. So I'll say that, hey, you give me some result, get back result or result, whatever that is. And for this, we are going to go ahead and first await. So await, and we'll be creating a function. That function doesn't exist yet. Handle regular routes, because there are complex routes as well. Handle regular routes. In this, we'll be passing on a couple of things. First, we have to pass on this file URL. So let's go ahead and do this file URL. Send him request and response as well, and that's it. Based on this, it is going to give you a result. And all we have to do now is pass on this result. First, we have to check whether the result came in or not. So let's go ahead and do this. We can say if there is no result, that is also fine. Or you can do a major check. If the result is equals to false, there are a lot of false detection cases as well. Then we are going to go ahead and say we are going to return a res.status. We'll just directly do a send. Come on. Res.send, and we'll say that, what should I say? Not found, file not found, route not found, whatever makes sense to you. Route not found. Now, in the other cases, we can go ahead and say that, hey, if the data was found, then go ahead and send that data. Else, we are going to go ahead and say res.send, and we'll be sending, let's just send the result. All right, so now this makes a little bit sense. So notice here, index.js is returning me a user index file. Let's see if we are actually able to handle this or not. We won't be able to handle this because one major portion is still remaining. I know you are thinking that, hey, now we can actually handle this. But this magic function doesn't exist. Yeah, this handle regular route. So how you're going to handle the regular route? Yeah, that's $1 million question. But let's see. It's not really that hard. It's actually super easy. So I'll just go ahead and create it at the top, just right here. And obviously this is going to be an async function, handle regular routes, all of these things are getting imported, that's it. All right. Now, one of the key interesting thing here is just wrap up everything in the try catch. So there we go. The catch part is comparatively much more easier because in the catch, we will be getting an error, all right. And if the error comes up, we'll be first console logging it that, hey, there is an error. Once that is being done, then go ahead and let's create a status code res dot. Oh, by the way, don't send this res dot status because that actually sends the status. And once the headers are being sent, you cannot go ahead and modify this. So instead of using just the status, use the status code. Yeah, it took me some time to actually figure it out. But anyways, we'll be saying 404 because it doesn't exist. All right. Come on. And then we'll be saying that, hey, return false. This is something we have to take care. All right. Now, once this is done, how can our files, how can I actually first and foremost import this? Because, hey, I'm saying export const handler. So I'm importing the handler function. First and foremost, I need to import this. So let's go ahead and say that, hey, what module you are importing? Feel free to name it whatever you like. Module makes sense because we are importing a module. And we'll be saying await import from whatever the file. That's exactly why we have got the file name. Because it's not the file name that's magical, that's for our internal reference. User doesn't really care about whether that files exist or not. Once the file is created from the system, I want to grab that file because instead of writing const handler import or import handler from whatever the file is, I want to actually import it. Once I have this, this method actually now holds whatever we are sending here. So this is super easy to work with this. One more thing, we have to find out. Right now, we are just handling the handler part. That is actually super easy to work on with this because what you can do now here is, let's just say we can create a data and that data could be initially null. And later on, we can just go ahead and say, hey, data is going to be equal to, we have this module. It has a method known as handler. And this handler request response or whatever that is coming in, let's go ahead and grab it. And then eventually I can just go ahead and say return the data. That is good. Let's try this because there are a couple of issues in this. I'll walk you through with that. Save this and hopefully now things should be decent. Let's save this. All right. Send the response again. So if I go ahead and say I will request /user, let's see what happens. If I go ahead and send this, notice here we are able to grab this user index file. That is a big win. That is a big win. Now let's try to see what we are able to grab when I say /Hitesh. Obviously, we should be first able to grab. Notice here, module.handler is not a function. So we should be getting a route not found. That is good. User is happy. Now try to see what is happening. This /app route /user hitesh.js. So this was passed here in this. So this import statement actually grabs the entire path. From this, we are trying to extract the module and then the handler is coming in. But there is also an issue, or we can enhance the facility just like the Nextjs actually does this. Now we can also detect that whether the request is coming up is of type get request, post request, what is the verb here? So what we can do is, once this is all done, we can actually extract what the verb is. First, let's do a console log because, hey, I love to do, when you're building such thing, just say this is HTTP verb. So what is the verb that we are getting? There we go, suggestion. I love this. This is request.method. This actually gets you that what kind of request actually you are grabbing. Let's see more. I'll just go ahead and say, hey, now let's just say at least C. So we should be able to grab this thing. Yeah, it's crashing. That's okay. We are able to grab this. If I can go ahead and send a post request, yes, we are able to grab the request. Now, what I want to do is a little bit more, just like the Nextjs actually does this, is since I can detect my verb here now, I can actually design or allow my users to design a method in such a way that they can say export const post, export const get based on the method. So for example, if I go ahead and say, hey, Hitesh is only going to handle, we could have actually detected this since we have access to the request. Another case could be, hey, just detect if the request.method is get, write the code. If the request.method get, then write the method. So that is also the case. But what I want is something like this, that, hey, if the user is there, something like this, he can actually, let me show you what I really want and what can be done here as well. I'll show you that as one as well. But first, let's see what is the other case, the basic one. So we'll not return it like this. There could be one case. I'll show you this, the way how I actually came up with that. That's why I told you these are raw videos, little bit advanced, they take time. So I'll say method.get return user. So I'll just say, we'll just go ahead and say console log. We'll just do a console log here. And we'll say it was get. And similarly, we can go ahead and we can remove this. We can go ahead and have a copy of this if the method is post, and we can say it was post. So this will work. And what we're going to do is, this is console log, but we'll also want to return something. So we'll say return user Hitesh file. All right, save this. Now let's see what happens. So this is interesting. Now if I go ahead and send a post request, notice here it says HTTP verb post, and we see that it was post. So our file is completely capable of handling this. That's one way of handling the thing. But I want to do something different. I want to handle the post request. Let's try something more. So let's just say in this, I create a new folder again for experiment purpose. We just say login. And inside this login, let's just say I create a new file, and this could be index. Now we have handled both the cases, index.js. I want to give my user the ability that they can write something like this. Export const and something like post, get, put, delete, whatever the verb is. So we'll just start with the post. If we handle the post, obviously we can handle the rest as well. So this will be request, response. This is exactly how Nextjs actually does this. Like not exactly the code part, the flow that they do. All right, now here, what we're going to do is first we're going to do a console log of the entire request just for a minute. And I can just go ahead and say, hey, I will have a request body, and that will be coming up from request body. And then we'll be simply returning the request body. Yeah, we are not doing anything much here. But now this should actually, I should be able to do this one. So can I do this right now? Let me just check. So now instead of the user, let's just go ahead and say login. And obviously we are not handling the get request, so there is no point of having the get request there. But I should be able to send this. So inside params, not params. This is post. Where is the request? Not able to find that. Okay. Oh, this is the response. Yeah, my bad. Hidden there, almost there. So what we can do is inside the body, we'll be getting a raw. We'll be saying JSON. And let's go ahead and say that, hey, we will be sending a username. If I can write that username, and I should be able to grab Hitesh as it is. What happens now if I send this? It says route not found, because all it's doing is the way we have designed this method is it always look for the handler function. Hey, module.handler, we are always getting that. But we can actually do a little bit modification, not too much, but a little bit modification because it's an easy thing. So now notice here module.handler. So similarly, we can extract if there is a method being designed here. So let's just go ahead and do that. So we'll just go like this and we'll say, hey, module. There's not always a dot post or dot get, something like that. If you remember, you can access your objects with the dot notation, and you can also access them with the square notation as well. Yeah, very basic JavaScript. And here you can actually go ahead and say, hey, I know where my verb is. We are just console logging it. So I think we don't need to console log it now. We can actually go ahead and just store that in a variable. So let's just go ahead and remove this and say request.method. Let's just call this one as http verb and request.method. And if we found that http verb, there we go. If the http verb is there, then we are going to go ahead and do something. Otherwise, we are exporting the handler. So we'll be saying then the data will be coming up from whatever the verb is. Just like we are having a dot handler, we are having, almost assume this. This is almost equivalent of saying module.post, module.get, module.put, whatever that is. And that's it. Now, this piece of code actually helps you to actually do exactly what we want to do. Let's save this. And now what you'll notice here is, if I go back up here, if I go ahead and do this post, now if I send this, and it says route not found, module.handler is not a function. It should be able to grab this. Did we wrote this into index? Export const post. No, it should be. Let me restart the server once again, or otherwise we'll debug this. And let's see. We'll have the post, and we are sending a login request with the data. So send this, and there we go. Module.handler is not a function. Surprisingly, it should have been working. So we are handling the handler part here. I forgot to save. And the login, did I saved it? Yeah, it looks okay. So export const post looks good. Let me check the index file again if we are making any mistake. So where are you? So we are checking indentation, hate that. We are checking if we are having HTTP verb. If we are having the verb, then we are checking whether the module is actually able to grab that. If that exists, then we'll be extracting the data by this module verb by sending request response as the data. We're returning the data, so should be fine. Let's test it out one more time. If I go ahead and say user, then let's see if I go ahead and send a GET request to this guy, user index file that's coming in. And what happens if I go ahead and send a post request to login? And there we go. Let's test it out. Route not found. Let's actually try to debug this. If we go ahead and say this one is handler, and let's see if this works in this way. Post, send this. We are actually able to grab this one. So I think there is a small debugging issue here, and I'm pretty sure the error part is here. So let me just quickly check where we are actually making this mistake. All right, so it was a very logical error and a couple of places which I messed up. So I'll walk you through what I did. So the first thing was, which I noticed is there was no else part here. So what was happening? We were checking and running if this piece of code is there, then go ahead and use that. Otherwise, this piece of code was always running. And that was creating the issue, major one. And also another piece of code which was creating the issue is the casing here. So if I go ahead and turn it back again, this was how it is. So if I go ahead and open this up, rest was all okay. So if I go ahead and send a post request to login, I send this, it says, hey, this doesn't exist and blah, blah stuff. So the reason for this is not a function. The first thing is, why is it saying that it's not a function? Because it's always trying to grab this one. So obviously this needs to go in the else part. So either run this or this. And right now with our flow, this is always going to happen no matter whether it's detected or not. So we need to actually parse it into the else part of this one. So we got this one. But there is again, the issue is if I go ahead and try to send this again, it says module.handler is not a function because the verbs that we get, if you notice here, are we printing the verb? No, we are not printing the verb. So let's try to print the verb as well. So if I go ahead and say, hey, let's go ahead and, Command C. Let's go ahead and do a console.log. Come on. Why is it not giving me suggestion? Wants me to write everything. Console.log. And we'll be having HTTP verb. So if I save this now, this should actually give you idea. And this is exactly how I got the idea. If I go ahead and send this, notice here, this is actually all caps. So there are a couple of options now in front of us that we can either make it all caps and force our users that, hey, whether you're writing the method, that should always be in the caps. This works fine, and we are able to grab the data and everything, so everything is working fine. But I think a better approach would be to let the user be more free. So I would prefer that all we have to do is just say that, hey, this should be dot to lowercase. There we go. That's it. And this actually allows my user to actually go ahead and freely write all lowercase, which is usually the norm and usually the case. Now, if I save this and go back, now notice here we are able to write these methods, so we can actually handle the post request or any request that, as a matter of fact. So if I go ahead and send this, it actually says that, hey, this is a post request and we are getting this username as a return. So if I just move it a little bit bottom, we can see the username is getting back. If I go ahead and send more data, since we are just throwing back the data again, if I go ahead and say email, and we'll say hitesh@email.com, whatever that is, obviously a fictitious email, we are actually able to grab this. So this is already a great achievement that we have done so far. And let me summarize this, because this is now a little bit ahead of a lot of people. Let me summarize this already. This is super easy, actually, if you go through with that. All we are doing is, first and foremost, we are saying app.all, handle all of the routes, and then we try to construct this URL. The goal of constructing this URL is I will be importing some methods from it. That's why I want to import this. I'm not worried about whether there's a / in the front of it or not. I'm not really cared about it. I want that there should be a reference from the root so that I can grab it. That's the whole idea. Why I want to grab it? Because there are some methods written in those files, and I want to extract these methods, whether these are called as handler or these are get, post, whatever those are, I want to extract that. So I grabbed that into my file URL, and then when I checked it, that whether this file exists or not. So if that file exists with the .js extension, of course, then if the file doesn't exist, I'll just trail it. I'll assume that's a directory. So I'll just say that, hey, that's a /index, and I'm also assuming if that file exists, then just go ahead and say .index, like hitesh.js. But there was a case that we were hallucinating here a little bit, that we saw that if the file name we just say Sam, it just says sam/index.js, and obviously if that doesn't exist, why we are having a route like that? So we have to rely on the functionality that if that file doesn't exist, then our result will be empty. The result will be false by default. It's nothing there. And we don't have to do anything. If the file doesn't exist, there is nothing written in it, obviously we are going to get a false. In that case, we are saying route doesn't exist. So yes, computationally, we are a little expensive on that side because we are waiting for that, but there is no other way of doing it as long as I can think. And if that gives us some data, then we'll be doing it. Now, the magic is happening inside this handle regular routes, which actually takes this file URL and request response. And we go back up here. In this handle regular route, what we are doing is simply we are taking this file URL. From this, we are saying that, hey, let me go ahead and get the module, and we'll be saying await import file URL. So this is almost like const. This is almost like this const app express, exactly like that, something like this. So we are just saying const module, and we are saying that await import. So whatever the handler is written there, that's a method. We are actually storing that into the module. Then we are checking whether the data is null. That's just a reference for having the data. Then we also worked on this directly, that data is going to be module.handler request response. So we are saying that inside the module, we know that there is a method known as handler, and we are just taking data out of it. Then we try to upscale the developer experience a little, and we said that, hey, we also want to detect whether there is an HTTP verb or not. And when the HTTP verb was there, then we simply use the square notation because that's easier instead of the dot notation, because in this case, I can go ahead and say module.http verb, that is also fine, but in this case, I prefer to have this one, much more easier. And then we can say data, module, verb, and request response. So that's it. Now this, what it does, actually my user now can write a handler function. And by the way, what happens if a user go ahead and write a handle, something like this here in the user? Let me just walk you through with that, because that's also important for you to see. You are in the learning phase. I'm also there. Let's just say if I go ahead and say /user, just like this, it will be a simple get request, send this, and it says, hey, I don't know what you're talking about because a handler is not function. So right now we are restricting the user that, hey, there should be a handler. You cannot do any method apart from this. So either we are looking for a get, post, put, or delete method, or whatever the verbs are, or we are saying handler. If you want to call this one as a, hey, this is my designed method, it should be called as Hitesh. Although that's not great, but I can certainly do that. It's my framework, so I'm designing it. All right. So this is part one. But now let's go ahead and move on to the kind of a difficult part, that how we are going to handle this case. This is a very, very interesting case. Now inside this, we have another type of a folder which says city and the city.js. So the first challenge in front of us is, if I go ahead and make a GET request on the city, I surely will be able to grab city. Okay, I mean the URL. So if I go ahead and open this up, let me get a little bit up here. All right. So I certainly grab the city. Where are you? Here it is. So I know that I can grab the URL of city index.js, but that's not what I want. I also want that there should be a checker which can check that if a file is a dynamic route or not. And we have to do it every single time. There is no escape from it, because inside any folder, there could be a square brackets. So before doing all of this, our regular execution and regular handling of this, handle regular. So if I go into main method, before we go ahead and check all of this, we have to check whether this is a dynamic route or not. Yeah. And there is no easy way of doing it. There has to be a regex for it. Yeah. I tried it with multiple ways as well, but no luck. It needs to be a regex. So first, this time we'll be saying that instead of saying handle regular routes, we'll be saying we want to handle the dynamic route. Again, we will assume that somehow you will design that file path and will give it to me. That's the assumption here. So let's go ahead and say, hey, this is going to be an async. That's going to be async, and we'll be saying a function. And this time the function is going to be, what should I call? Handle dynamic routes. Yeah. Handle dynamic routes. And again, the same stuff. We don't need a request, response, and all these things. We can work with them exactly like this. All we are looking forward here is, see, the job of extracting the function, the handler, or the verbs is still going to be taken care by this. We are not going to rewrite that. The only thing which I want to extract from this is request.params. My parameter should be available to me. That is all I'm saying. Okay, so how can we do this? First, give me just the folder name or the file name. We can say file URL in this one again. Let's just call this one as folder, because that's technically what you'll be giving me. This will usually be a folder. So let's go back up here. And let's go ahead and wrap it up with a try catch. Just like always, the catch part is easy. We'll be saying the error is E. Console log this. And we'll be saying, hey, this is an error. That's it. And return null. You can return false as well, but we'll be returning a null. All right. Now, how we can handle the try part of it? The try part of it is, we're going to check. We'll be saying that, hey, fs, it actually can return you promises as well. Return me a promise when you check read directory. So there is an option in which you can actually read the directory. So what it does actually, it reads the content of a directory. And what's more important here is what we get back. So notice here, read directory, and hopefully this will give me what we get. Actually, what we get is an array. Yeah, that's the most interesting part. And if I can show you, the file names returned will be passed as a buffer object. Yeah, that's a buffer object, but we can still loop through it. So what we're going to say is reader, and we'll be passing on the folder name or the file name. So whatever you're giving, I'll say that, hey, if this is a folder, you will be giving me this, otherwise no problem. So we'll be saying const, and we'll be having files just like this. And now I have access to this. So I am holding a reference of the buffer. And in this buffer, I can go ahead and loop through this. So the easiest way is have this files, and we can just go ahead and say, hey, I want to find something. Now, here's the interesting part. What do you want to find? Okay, I want to find a file name who matches something like this. So we're going to go ahead and say return and f name, whose file name dot and match. And this is where I can go ahead and use my regular expression. A lot of stuff. And this is exactly where I used the pieces that, hey, I want to find out a file name and all that. I gave it a lot of examples and stuff. And finally, I was able to prompt engineer that, hey, this is exactly what I am looking up for and all of this. So notice here, this is a JavaScript syntax. You can go ahead and copy this. I used exactly that. So I'll just go ahead and copy this. So again, we can minimize this. I use this. And I'll just go ahead and say, there we go. So this is the expression that I am matching. And if that comes up, that's great. Now notice here, why is it making this kind of a nonsense? I said files.find, not like this. Auto suggestions sometimes are bad. And obviously we'll be holding a reference of it. So we'll be saying const and we'll be saying square file name. Yeah, whatever that is. So this is my square file name. Better name would be dynamic file name. Okay. So assuming that if I have access to this file name, I want to return two things. The first thing is I want to return what the file is. Obviously now we have got the file name, so I want to return the file name as it is. Also, I want to return him the exact name, because right now, if you notice this file name would be something like this, square brackets and maybe city.js. So this is obviously I want to return him this exactly so that it can actually import this. So that will be useful for it. But also I want to return by removing this JS, by removing this first square bracket and this square bracket and .js. So first, what I will do is I'll remove the first square bracket. This is how it is right now. So I have JavaScript and I can use chaining. First, I'll remove this first square bracket. As soon as you detect it, remove it. Then remove this portion. We are 100% sure if we have reached this phase, then obviously we have to remove this. So we'll go ahead and do like this. Let me try this, show you that. So we'll be first and foremost, we'll be returning an object, and this object will be first a file. So what is the file? Dynamic file name. So that's the file name. But we also want to return you a param, because that's exactly what the URL will be coming up for. So what we can say is param, and that param is going to be, hey, dynamic file name and dynamic file name. And instead of match, no, we don't want to use this one. We want to use replace. Why replace? Because it's so much easier to detect a thing and just say empty strings and it just removes it. That's the easy way. So I'll say, hey, go ahead and find two things. First of all, go ahead and find this initial square bracket. As soon as you find it, go ahead and replace it with this one. This obviously is going to give you a string back, and I can further chain on a replace to it. And in this replace, I can go ahead and say replace. I can go ahead and say that next time I want to, what do I want? I want a closing square bracket and a .js, and that whole thing should be replaced by nothing. So I hope now you understand that in the params, we actually have the exact file name. So whatever the city, whatever that is. This is the entire thing, square bracket, city.js and everything. This is just the name city, because this will help us to set the parameters. Because in case you have worked with the Express anytime, we do this. So in the route, if we have /id, in the params, if you know this, request.params.id is there. So we need that. That is how we are going to extract. It's a key value pair. We have to set the object. Similarly, if somebody is saying /user ID, we have to set it as request.params.user ID. That's how it is. In our case, the way how this is going to be city. So this is going to be city. So somebody will be able to extract the object by request.params.city. So that's why it's important we grab both of them, the file name as well as what will be the parameters. All right, quite a lot of stuff, but it's fun. It's interesting. All right, so once this is all done, that is it. That is all what we are doing. The whole idea of having this handle dynamic route is just simple, that if somebody comes at this point of the time and we have got our URL, whatever that is, sam dash, whatever that URL is, just check whether that might be a dynamic URL. That is all I want. Rest of the things, once I know the URL and everything, extracting handler or a post method, that will be done by handle regular routes. So if I go ahead and move this now, where? Once we have gone through with the file URL, that might be good one, that might be sam. Sam in this case doesn't exist. So that's why I'm referring sam again and again. Okay. So how we are going to go ahead and check whether this is actually an accurate one or not. So in this case, here is an interesting thing. Let's just say if we are not returning, so this is all right. Let me just quickly see. Let me analyze this one more time. All right. So in this case, what we can do is there are a couple of ways actually this can actually land. The first one is we are trying to grab the result by handling the regular routes. And if we found the route, that's great. Otherwise, we are returning a route not found. Now, if we are not able to find the result, then there might be a case that it might be a dynamic routing. So instead of returning this, let's go ahead and comment this out. What we can do is we can find out whether the things are actually dynamic or not. So here we'll be first check whether the things are dynamic. Otherwise, we'll not be doing. Now, here is an interesting thing. Let me just again go back here and let me show you what I really want to do now. Okay, we have this city, and after this city, let's just say I'm looking for Jaipur because I live there. That's a beautiful city. If I go ahead and send this one, what I want to show you is I'm able to grab the city, app route, city, and index.js. But notice here, we're not worried about this index.js. I'm actually able to grab this app route city, and I should be able to grab this Jaipur as well. So how am I going to do this? That is the most important thing. Let me show you some interesting tricks around it. So I'll just go ahead and say that, hey, right, route not found, you are not gonna run here, at least as a moment. And what I'll go ahead and say, I'll just say this, I do have a path. So I'll just go ahead and convert this into array, path array. How can I do this one? Again, all we're going to do is construct this route again and then split it. So we have this root folder, all right. In this, I can go ahead and say again that, hey, you will get a request.url. And first and foremost, go ahead and replace all these because there can be 2 slashes as well. I've noticed that. Replace any slash with this and then go ahead and split it based on the slash. Now what this will give me, that is a question. So if I go ahead and do this path array, let's see what we are able to grab. All right, let's go ahead and see this. At least we can see this. If I go ahead and send this, now notice here, if I cancel this, I'm able to grab the dot. So I have reconstructed the path and the slashes. So now we have a string and we are splitting the string based on the slashes. So we have this app routes, and we have this city, and we have this Jaipur as well. Now notice carefully, if I go ahead and change this from Jaipur to Udaipur, also again, a beautiful city, Udaipur, and if I send this, it now gives me Udaipur. So the last element of the array is something which is useful for me. And can I grab this last element? Super easy to grab. Let's just go ahead and say const last element is going to be, yes, that's also a way of grabbing it, but there's also easy way as well. Path array, that's exactly path array.len. That's why I love these suggestions. You can also go ahead and use a pop. Pop actually removes the very last method and it actually gives you the reference of it. So now we have the last element access. All right, nice. Okay, what can I do with this? What you can do with this is, now since you have access to this, let's go ahead and create it with this one as well. So what I'm saying is, I'm going to go ahead and do a console log first so that you can see what am I trying to do. I'll just go ahead and say, hey, I have access to this path array, not the path array. Actually, we actually hold it as path array directly. We should have done a little bit more than this. Anyways, since we didn't do it, that's okay. I thought if we had an access of the original URL, we should have kept it into a variable that would have made life easier, but there is again a way. So we have this path array, okay, and we can just go ahead and join this, not JSON, join this, and we're going to be joining this based on the slash. Okay, so now do you have access to this? Why am I doing this? Yeah, that's a good question. I'll answer that. Don't you worry. If I go ahead and send this, now I have app route /city. no matter what I do, if I go ahead and say Jaipur, I can go ahead and say Jaipur, I still have access to the city. Also, I have this last element access as well. Why this? Why this? Okay, let me get you onto this one as well. That's super easy. Nothing to be worried on that part. The reason for this is because my method, which is handle dynamic route, actually asks me to give me a folder. Why folder? Because this read directory actually reads the content of the folder, and we want to just check one more time. If somehow we were not able to get any data because there is no handler, no post, it didn't find the file, then maybe that's a dynamic file. So if that's a dynamic file, give me the folder name. I'll go through the entire folder and see how many of the parameters you are looking for. Because in the city, there could be a city.js in the square bracket. There could be a id.js as well. I don't want to create 1,000 different files for each one of them, or 1,000 different checkers or detectors for each one of them. So I'm just checking, hey, how many of these? Just go ahead and grab this. Okay. So I hope that makes a little bit clarity here. So now we are able to grab this one. Okay, so now let's go ahead and say that, hey, this one is going to be my folder to pass on. So let's just go ahead and remove the console log. And we'll just go ahead and remove this. And we'll just go ahead and say const folder to check. There we go. Now I can use the method. Yeah, finally I can use the method. Okay, all we have to do is, obviously this is going to take some time, so await. And this one is going to be handle dynamic routes. We don't want to use it like this. Okay, folder to check. Let's escape this. There we go. We can use a dot then syntax as well, but I'm going to hold a reference just like this. Classic, old school. So now what we can do is, let's call this one as dynamic handler. Dynamic handler. All right. Now the thing is that here, inside the city, actually there is nothing too much complex that we are doing. In this city, all we have to do is, again, we have to write this, the concept is still same. Either we have to go with the handler or request post. Let me again rephrase that. The concept is still same. Either we have to write the handler method or we have to write the post or get method. So exactly same. We'll go with the const export, obviously. Export const handler. And this handler is going to go ahead and say request response just like this. If you have this one, let's just go ahead and say const. We'll be extracting city from request.params and we'll be returning just like this. We'll be saying a backticks and we'll be saying city file, or we'll be saying city name is. That's much better. All right, so save this. This is exactly same. Now, if this is the handler that we have grabbed, then rest of things are actually easy. We don't have to be worried about. The thing is, what if we don't get anything out of it? If you don't get anything out of it, then this statement becomes true that, hey, route not found. If we don't get anything even here, then things are easy. So let's just check if there is no suggestions. Dynamic handler, we'll be saying that, hey, this doesn't exist, so we don't found anything. You can give it a response and all of this as well. But if you found that, that's where things becomes interesting. If you have found that, then we cannot actually go ahead and directly send that. We have to access this request and we have to say params. And this is exactly why we actually said, if you'll do this, this is actually problematic statement. Yes, you can do this, but what you're doing is you are overwriting every single params. Yeah, I did that mistake when first I actually worked on it. You shouldn't be doing that. So the ideal way of doing this is actually go ahead and say, hey, this is going to be first. We'll go like this and we'll say, hey, ... spread them out, request.params, and then say that I want to add a property to it, which is dynamic handler.param, whatever the param you are grabbing. So that's one thing. And then set it to whatever the last element we have got it. So call it as dynamic param, call it as last element, whatever that is. The whole idea is it needs to set this with this one. All right, so last element is here. All looks good. Okay. Now we have overwritten that request. Now we can actually use the data. Do we have access to data? Okay, should be. We have access to this one. So let me go back here. So now we can actually modify this. All right, so this is good, but we don't want that. So we'll be saying, hey, the result that we have is going to go ahead and say await handle regular routes. Yeah, you can go ahead and I can give you the folder to check because that's basic of it. And what else? This is going to create an issue. So let me just write that. Await, and then we'll be saying handle regular route. This needs parameters. Okay, the first parameter that it needs, the rest one is easy. We can get request and we can say request and response. That part is easy. But first part for us is not the folder name. That is where you can make a mistake. Because right now what we have access, if you remember, we do have access, but that's the folder name. And where is the folder name? We can close this. Where is handle? Yeah, here it is. Folder to check. So we have access to this folder name. We again have to recreate this file name so that it can actually extract this. And that's not really that bad. We can go ahead and say, hey, this is going to be square bracket. And we'll be saying that, hey, we do have access to, okay. Let me check what we have quickly, that how we can construct this one. All right, so figured it out. The way how we can actually do this is we have access to this folder to check. Okay, that's easy one. And we need to give that what kind of two things we want to join, because it's not just the folder to check. Inside this, we want a file name as well. So we need one more part of this array, and then we can join them. Obviously, that part is easy. We can go ahead and that part is super easy. We can go ahead and say, hey, join them based on the slash. So in the string slash. Okay, but the problem is folder to check is easy. What is my file name as well? And luckily, not luckily, but planning, we actually gave a parameter back to the result of this dynamic handle dynamic route, as we are giving this file as well, or call it as file name, whatever that is. So who is getting the result? Where is the wait? So this dynamic handler, this one is getting the result. So I'll just go ahead and say that you come up here, and since you have an access.file, now we'll join you back with the slash. So since you have access to .file, that means you will be able to grab this entire file name, whatever the square bracket thing and all of that. Whew, that's too much. That's a lot of things. All right, so once we have joined this, now we have access to this result. All we have to do is send the result. All right. Did we send the result if we don't get this? Yeah, we have sent this here. Now let's go back and try this. We can go ahead and say, hey res.send the result. Oh man, that's too much. All right, now hopefully this should be able to work, at least in theory. Otherwise we'll debug. All right, so let's go ahead and say this is city, Jaipur, send it, route not found. All right, what's your problem? Files.find is not a function. All right, where did I mess it up? Files.find is a function. Come on, I know that it exists in the, okay, yeah, await files. Yeah, this is where we are getting fs.promises. Oh, my bad. This is a file handling. Await. Yeah, this will take some time. This is exactly the error I was talking about. Yeah, this happens. So you need to be very, very cautious about it. I'll go back here. Let's try this out. There we go. We see that there is a get route. Obviously, we got some errors. Okay, so we saw that imported from Nextjs routing. Okay, so probably we are having some issue in this. At least there is some progress. Okay, so our import statement is having some issue. Let me quickly debug that and see that where we are making the mistake in reconstructing the file. Yes, it took me some time to debug it, and boy, it was such a common error that why couldn't I just set it? But again, this happens with the debugging process. Anyways, so you'll find a ton of console log into this entire file, and still we were getting some issues. So the issue is not getting this IDs and everything. That is working fine. We actually tried it with just the basics. And first, how I debug it, that's also important. You need to understand. The first step was to see that, okay, I'm not getting the parameters. So let me just try to get this request.params, that if I'm getting it here at least. And then I also try to see that whether I'm getting the proper path or not. And turns out probably this portion didn't got saved or something. I just hit the save and it started working. So there was no change at all here in this place, but there was a different error which consumed a lot of my time. So I tried and see that whether the path is correct or not. That was the first goal. So if I go up here and look up this, so if I go ahead and say city, Jaipur, or any other city, or let's just say Udaipur, that's a nice city as well. So notice here we are getting this, and the first instinct was to get this whether we are getting the correct URL or not. So I console logged it and turned out that, hey, this is really nice. We are getting all the URLs and everything properly, and it was working fine. But when I scrolled a little bit, then this is the error which caught my attention, and I spent like probably 15-20 minutes with it, that why this module is not able to find. Everything is working fine, but how come this is not working? The reason for this is not working, when I actually did a little bit more console log, is, hey, this route doesn't exist. The route, the URL of approute/city/udaipur/index.js, this doesn't exist. And yes, this took me a little bit while to actually figure out and understand that why this is happening. Because this only will happen when you have this one, this /city/udaipur. And the reason for that is, before checking whether the data has came in or not, we tried to handle it as a regular route. So we were assuming that, hey, let's just say probably this is a regular route. So we can just grab the data and send it. And we try to grab the data from the URL which doesn't exist. So yeah, we need a little bit of more of try and catch handling so that these kinds of modules and everything doesn't really bother you. Probably we can check whether the route exists before getting the result from it. Probably check that whether that file exists or not. That would be much better approach. But again, I'm not trying to build the Nextjs. I'm trying to just show you that how things actually works, the internals of it. And yes, it took some time, probably how much long? 1 hour, 16-minute video, and probably counting it. But yes, you get this idea that how much engineering effort has been done in the Nextjs to make this file-based routing. But it's not really that far. Now that you know, you can also build it. I'll actually leave this entire source code into the comment section as well. I'll not be giving the city login and everything. This is basic, so there's nothing much. Sorry about that. A little itchy throat. I've been sipping water again. Anyways, so this is all what we have gone through with it here. Really happy to have this one. And again, I know only a handful of people are going to watch it. But it's really nice that we have such an amazing stuff being built up here. Super happy, super excited, and probably in the upcoming videos, I'll walk you through how the internals of more such thing actually works. Probably virtual DOM, probably Redux, and there's so much more, and it's so much exciting to actually have this kind of a stuff. So that's it for this video. Hope you have enjoyed this, and let's catch up in the next video.